So that you can gauge my taste with this series, let me start by saying that I adored the Kyoshi novels, but I was not a fan of the Yangshin books, which I didn't even finish. With the latter, I tried reading it twice, giving up at the 40% mark the first time, then after trying it again, I gave up on it again at around 60%. I was told the series gets better, but I only got into 30% of the second book before I washed my hands of it. It just wasn't my vibe. So, where does The Reckoning of Roku, written by Randy Ribay, stack up? Right in the middle overall, though I will say there are things that FCE, the author of the previous book, does better than Randy Ribay.
Love is love.
Ribay's writing style is well suited for the Avatar world, in my opinion. It's casual and aligns closely with the sensibilities of the original series, making the reading experience feel familiar and accessible. FCE's writing was great, but it sometimes, at least for me, delved into the realm of being too poetic instead of being prosaic. I'll elaborate more on this further in my review. The standout character for me was the younger version of Gyatso, who is basically Aang in this. His struggle with airbending and his charming, goofy personality made him a delightful character to root for. His superpower was basically becoming instant friends with anybody within the space of a few scenes, except for Sozin, which should be very telling. His arc with his airbending struggles was predictable, however, but it still was very heartwarming. The chapters featuring Sozin was among the book's greatest strengths. His pragmatism and the nuanced portrayal of his character added depth to the story. While he wasn't particularly likable, I appreciated the better understanding of his motivations and background, and I hope the follow-up book does a better job of showing this in a less evil way and more as a practical way he carries himself with. Ribay did a commendable job navigating the established lore of Avatar: The Last Airbender. His writing style, as I said before, is true to the world that we know and love, with new locations and a new spirit adding fresh elements to the lore. There were sequences, particularly one action piece near the end, that I could actively see animated in my mind in the nice fluid choreography we got from The Legend of Korra. At times, the dialogue felt too modern and American, which pulled me out of the story. This aspect made the book feel less authentically East Asian compared to FCE's work, which felt like an intimately Asian story the way that the story was told, and the manner the characters carried themselves culturally. That said, I'm not Asian or Asian American, so take that with a grain of salt as someone looking in from the outside. That said, I would argue that the original show that it's based on is more American than it is Asian, so this actually might be a positive for the story itself depending on where your opinion lies. It just feels like FCE's prose, while a bit too poetic at times for my taste, does elevate the world, while Ribay feels more like an imitation. Overall, I side with Randy Ribay's style of writing, though I feel it has a lower overall ceiling in terms of its beautiful prose. What's more, Roku's story felt more like filling the gaps rather than offering a compelling new narrative. His privileged background and predictable arc didn't make for an engaging read all the time. And I feel like there was this sense of being told how to feel about Roku rather than experiencing it organically, which was a letdown. There were several times when Gyatso tells characters what Roku is or is trying to be, but when we are in Roku's POV, that doesn't seem to track. And this isn't just because Roku is hiding his true insecurities, but also in the way that he speaks to other characters. It just felt like it was a forced and contrived arc. Also, the tragic elements of the book didn't resonate as deeply as they probably should have with me, and there's some pretty, rough parts of this story, a lot of tragedy. There was a disconnect that made it hard to feel the intended emotional impact. Some of the story was surprising to be sure, but none of it impacted me in the same way that I was moved by, say, the tragic elements of the Kyoshi novels that still move me to this day. I was also hoping for a deeper exploration of Roku and Sozin's relationship, but the focus of the book was more on Roku and Gyatso. This shift left the development of their friendship and eventual fallout feeling unexplored, but my guess is that all of that might show up in the following book. And then keeping with that thought process, sometimes the book felt disjointed and disconnected with all the branching storylines and side characters. In fact, the book is quite thin and short if you really pull out some of that side content. The core story of Roku is quite simple and middle of the road. And while it's great to see nods to the original series, some references felt heavy-handed. This is a continual issue for most tie-in fiction. I grew up reading Star Wars books, and it always seems like new authors to the genre or new authors to a certain franchise always seems like they have to prove themselves, as if they want to validate their geek card by throwing in references throughout. There were more than a few in this book that felt forced for sure. Overall, Overall, I would recommend The Reckoning of Roku to fans of Avatar The Last Airbender. I'm not so sure that this is a home run for non-Avatar fans though. For example, even for a non-Avatar fan, I would recommend the Kyoshi books, as I think they are good stories on their own. But The Reckoning of Roku feels like it's leaning on the fan base and is pretty much held up by your pre-established knowledge of the show. Not to say that it's a completely dull book, it's actually pretty engaging. It actually held my attention throughout the entire piece, but I'm just not sure that a non-Avatar fan would, just pick this up and would enjoy it on its own merits. Despite its shortcomings though, it offers an easy and enjoyable read that expands on the Roku character and the world of Avatar. The introduction of new elements and characters like the young Gyatso and an all-new spirit in a mysterious location adds fresh interest to the narrative. While it doesn't reach the heights of the Kyoshi novels in my opinion, or offer the same depth of the craft as FCE's writing, it still is an okay addition to the series, and I'll be keeping an eye out for the follow-up with interest, unlike the Yongchen books. But let me know what you think. Did you enjoy The Reckoning of Roku? Have you read it yet? Did you listen to it on an audiobook? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace, love, and remember, be water, my friends.